Shall we start? Today we are going to discuss some of the important economics topics. I have started out around 35 to 48 km, including some important economic terminologies also. So most important I am discussing so that I can discuss very elaborately. That is the reason why I have selected only 42, including the important terminology. So without wasting the time, let's start the screen sharing. So yesterday we have discussed, day before yesterday we have discussed some of the previous year papers. So they are asking repeatedly what's very important in the current affairs. So some of the important terminology related to TRIPS and TRIPS plus I have discussed in the international relations only. Yesterday we have discussed about currency manipulator, and that is expected question this time because US has listed India because we are following dirty floating rather than free floating. Then yesterday we discussed about the difference between fixed term employment and temporary employment also. So that is also one of the important things. Look into this labor codes also, which is important for the mains. But don't know whether okay. The difference between cess and surcharge is that cess and surcharge both are tax on the tax. Tax के ऊपर tax लगाना, we say it as cess or surcharge. But cess has very specific purpose, whereas surcharge has no specific purpose. No specific purpose. For example, there is Krishi Kalyan cess in the recent times. There is Krishi Kalyan cess in the recent times, which whenever you buy a real estate property, then this Krishi Kalyan cess of 0.5% is also added. There is Swachh Bharat cess of 0.5%. There is coal cess of 300 rupees or 400 rupees per ton, I think. In the recent times, they have increased it to 400. They may increase further also. So this is called as a cess. This cess, whatever the money which we get through the cess, goes to specific departments. Specific department. For example, Swachh Bharat cess. Where it goes to the Swachh Bharat department only. The ministry which is implementing the Swachh Bharat scheme or yojana. Like for example, if it is Swachh Bharat urban, then it will go to the urban affairs minister. If it is a Swachh Bharat Abhiyan rural, then it will go to the Ministry of Rural Development. This specific purpose, and the money will be utilized for specific purpose only, for cleaning the country or ensuring proper hygiene in the country, all these things. If there is Krishi Kalyan cess, then it will go to Krishi means the agricultural laborers, Krishi Kalyan cess. So it will go to the agricultural ministry and the money will be spent on the farmers' welfare. Same is the case with the coal. Coal cess which is collected, which will not go to the coal India or Ministry of Coal, but it goes to the renewable energy. The cess we are collecting to invest in the renewable energy. Whereas surcharge is the tax on tax. The amount which we collect, which we get, which the amount which is collected through the surcharge will not go to the ministries. It will directly go to the Consolidated Fund of India, CFI. But here, cess doesn't go to the Consolidated Fund of India. Cess go to the ministry only. It is kept for specific purpose. So this is the difference between cess and surcharge. It is in the news because their share of the states in the divisible pool has declined from 36% to 32% in the fiscal year 2020. So they are asking for more share of the cess with the state governments, because already state governments are suffering from a lot of financial crunch because of the COVID things. So Article 270, this is the article which of the Constitution which allows the center to levy cess and surcharge, which center need not share with the state government. Need not share. Its center has its own. It has its own independency to share, whether to share or whether not to share with the state governments. But state governments are demanding. Finance Commission also says whatever the revenue which you get, please share it with the states, because financial independence of the states is required. If you make the states dependent on the center, then they will not develop. For every time they have to come to you and they have to ask for the money. So this is the difference between cess and surcharge. But both cess and surcharge are temporary in nature. They are not permanent in nature. Okay. Once it is imposed, it is not permanency. It can be removed. For example, coal cess after 10 years or 15 years can be removed. Swachh Bharat cess, once the country becomes clean and green, then they will remove this Swachh Bharat cess. So this is the thing. There currently states are opposing these taxes because there are two reasons. One, they are making it permanent nature, because once the cess is imposed on certain thing, it is present perennially. Even though it is temporary provision, it is there for 20 years or 30 years. It is like that because of their permanency. Even though the main aim, the main objective of the cess is fulfilled, they are not they are not removing it, because center is getting the money, center is getting the tax, extra tax 0.5% or 1% or 2%. So they became a permanent in nature, and center using this cess as a tool to, this what is this Swachh Bharat cess is there, or education cess is there. Education is which subject? Concurrent subject. Or they Krishi Kalyan cess, agriculture. Agriculture is which subject? It is a state subject. So they're imposing cess on the state subjects also, and they are trying to administer the states through these kinds of taxes. So these are the two things which is opposed by the states towards the center. So you can, if you are writing in the center-state relations in the mains examination, you can write this particular example also, that it is a conflict between the center and the states. This kind of cess and surcharges. But most probably they will ask what is the difference between cess and surcharge only. They will change certain statements and they will ask. Next, borrowing limits of the states. What is present under Article 292 and 293? 292 is the article which says that whenever center is borrowing certain money, it has to take the permission from the parliament. Center means here the executive, that is a cabinet or a council of ministers. Government means council of ministers. So whenever they are borrowing certain amount from the World Bank or certain IMF or certain other multilateral banks, then they have to take permission from the parliament. That is legislation should be properly informed that I am taking the money, because people are going to pay that money through the taxes. So this Article 292 says this, and Article 293 says whenever states are borrowing money from the other banks or the banks which are inside, not from the parliament but from the center, council of ministers. So this is the difference. What the various commissions on the center-state relations like Punchi Commission and Sarkaria Commission are there. Punchi Commission and Sarkaria Commission. Both these commissions are for ensuring proper coordination between center and the states. Punchi Commission is a new commission, center-state relations, and Sarkaria Commission to some extent old commission which is formed in 1980s. 1980s. So what these commissions say that center is asking using this Article 293 more often. Whenever states are borrowing, they are restricting the states through Article 293. But they never used this Article 292. They did not discuss whenever they are taking money from other bank, whenever the center is borrowing from the banks, they are not using this Article 292. So Article 292 is less utilized than Article 293. This is one of the complaint of the states. Why they are imposing so much restrictions on the state when they're trying to borrow and use for the development. But center gave the reason that, see, if you are failing to pay, if the states fail to pay, then it is a center to pay, because it is a sovereign guarantee is there. Sovereign guarantee, that is government, central government acts as a guarantor. If the states doesn't pay, then I will pay. This is that is the reason why they are using this Article 293 more often. So it is recently in the news because center has raised the borrowing limits for the states from 3 to 5%. Initially, it is only 3% of the GSDP. Now they are increased it to 5%, so that states can borrow more money and they can utilize for the development of the people. Why they have increased? Because of this COVID, the economic depression, states are not getting proper revenues. Okay, the main revenues for the center state is that alcohol, petroleum, sales tax. These taxes are only there. So once the COVID has come, due to the lockdown, there is no transportation, and there is restriction on the sale of wines and spirits. So this is because states are urging for the hike in the cap of borrowings from which is currently 3% under FRBM Act. So what is this FRBM Act? This is important. FRBM Act is important. They will not ask, they have raised it to 3 to 5%. They will always ask the background, the thing. So whenever you see certain kind of institution or organization, learn about that organization. Don't just read the current affairs and leave it. Okay, learn about that background organization. So FRBM, this is the act which is enacted in 2003, and they kept the target of 2009 by 2008, 2009. They kept that the fiscal deficit should be limited to 3% of the GDP, and revenue deficit should be made 0%. Because among the fiscal deficit and revenue deficit is more dangerous. Why revenue deficit is more dangerous than fiscal deficit? So revenue deficit is a deficit because of daily expenses. We are unable to achieve the daily expenses also. Those items are present in the revenue deficit. But in the fiscal deficit, if you take the loan, this deficit is because of long-term loans. But revenue deficit is because of day-to-day expenditure also we are unable to manage. Go to the basics and see what is revenue deficit, what is fiscal deficit, what is effective revenue deficit. Okay, these things are important for the preliminary examination. They will not ask the current affairs things. They will ask these things only. Okay, why revenue deficit is very important, is very worst. Buy daily items. For example, in your family, if you are asking loan, your father is asking loan for buying 1 kg of rice, then that is the poorest condition which you have. If he's asking loan for buying a house or buying a car, then people will give. The neighbors will give you. But if you're asking loan for buying some daily items like whatever it is, some vegetables or rice, then no one will give you. It is a worst. You are unable to manage your daily expenses. First, manage your daily expenses, then go for the higher expenses like buying a car or buying a house. So that is the reason why revenue deficit is more dangerous than the fiscal deficit. So FRBM said it should be 0%. It should be 0%, and FD should be 3%. But it was postponed many times because in 2008-9 we have seen this global financial depression. Global financial depression we have seen, and in 2000 it was extended to 2012-13 also. But 12-13 also we haven't achieved this thing, and again we have extended it to further 2020. So in the recent times we have formed this encasing committee to recommend again on this kind of uh, about this FRBM Act. In 2016 we have seen this demonetization. Because of this demonetization and GST Act, again the growth has slowed down to some extent. So we could not achieve the targets which FRBM Act has mentioned. And it is a statutory act, it is not a constitutional act. Whereas in Brazil it is a constitutional act. They have kept fiscal deficit should be 3%, below 3%. They kept this in the constitution. That is the reason why around 4 or 5 years back the government has fallen down, because they couldn't achieve the constitutional principles also. What is present in the constitution they couldn't achieve. So government has fallen down. So encasing is a committee which recommended on this FRBM recommended. So one of the main recommendation is that FD should be 3% by 2020, 2.8% by 2021, and 2.5% by 2023. But again, we couldn't achieve because of this COVID. Whenever we are thinking about this FRBM, we are unable to achieve because some or other issue are coming. And one of the important thing he has mentioned in his recommendations is that escape clause. What is this escape clause? And he did not recommend RD, that is revenue deficit, as 0%. He did not recommend RD as 0%. He said it should be less than 0.5%, at least 0.5%, because 0% is ideal, 0% is unachievable. So why to keep unachievable targets, and why to feel bad that I couldn't achieve the target? So this is the practical target. 0.5% is a practical target. So one of the things which he mentioned here is escape clause. Escape clause means whenever we keep certain target. For example, I kept the target of completing the classes 10 days at a stretch. I already said that give some escape clause also. For example, if I have more work in the office, or if I couldn't take because of some unavoidable circumstances, then give me the escape that I will take the other day. Similarly, there is escape clause which is inserted by encasing that if there are any national natural calamities, or if there are any, if there is any war which is happening, if country goes for war, or there is natural calamity, or if there are structural reforms. For example, in 1991, we had this structural reforms, that is LPG reforms, liberalization, privatization, globalization. and we have inserted the tertiary sector, jumping from agriculture sector to the tertiary sector, ignoring the secondary sector. So because of that, what happened? Many unemployment has increased. So during these structural reforms or collapse of agriculture because of continuous droughts or decline in the real output growth by 3 percentage points below the average of 4 previous quarters. So these are the things where he has said that you can overcome, you can cross this fiscal deficit. For example, India can go more than 2.8% of the fiscal deficit during this financial year 2021. It can go up to 3% or 3.5%. So this is escape clause. There is no criticism on the government. So this is the thing. This is about escape clause. This time I'm expecting this question because of the COVID. These things last year only I expected, but it couldn't come. Then empowered group of secretaries, project development cells. So previously, around 10 years back, you have seen this GOMs and EGOMs, group of ministers and empowered group of ministers. What is the difference between group of ministers and empowered group of ministers? Why this empowered? Try to understand the basic concept. Then you will enjoy the studying. Otherwise, it will go again and again. You will be in the cycle perennially. So group of ministers, if there is any issue initially, in 2010s when UPA 1 and UPA 2 were there, they used to have the GOMs and EGOMs. And once the India government came, India 2, I mean after 2014, when India government came, they thought that these are time wasting process only. They will again discuss the things and they are just trying to extend the time rather than implementing. So they have abolished these things to curb the red tapeism and all those things. So GOMs means on any issue they will discuss the thing. They will just discuss. They will not take any decision. They will only submit the recommendations to the higher authorities or to the respective ministries. Whereas EGOMs can take the decision. They are empowered to take the decision on certain issue. For example, to construct a bridge on this particular river. If there are any environmental factors or environmental problems are there or biodiversity problems are there, then the group of ministers, if it is sent to the group of ministers, then they will only discuss and submit the recommendations. But if it is empowered group of ministers, then they will not only discuss, but they will take the decision also. They will take the decision to implement all, and they will implement also. Okay, that is the difference. So recently we have this empowered group of secretaries. Empowered group of secretaries instead of ministers, they have formed this empowered group of secretaries. That is the reason why P. Chidambaram sometimes says that. So this empowered, that's why P. Chidambaram has said that Modi government is just copycat government. They are just changing the names of the schemes. Nothing new they are doing. That is what the criticism of the opposition government, opposition parties. So recent government has approved for setting up of GOS and PDCs. GOS means group of secretaries, because ultimately the ministers are bound. Ministers have to ask what the secretary will opinionated about it. For example, it should be constructed. They will ask IAS officers and IPS officers only. What is the issue there? Shall we implement it or not? So this is the things they will ask. So cabinet secretary as chairperson, CEO of Niti Aayog is a member of this EGOS, and other members include secretaries of various departments like promotion, industry and international trade department, commerce, revenue and economic affairs. So this EGOS is important because in the COVID times or after GST, many of the things are not going well enough. Many of the things are not going. We are not able to achieve proper growth which we have to achieve. That is the reason why they have established this EGOS. So bringing synergies between ministries and departments, attract investment and facilitation of the global investors. Then PDCs, project development cells. These are mainly to facilitate the projects for their timely implementation of effective coordination between the central and the state governments. So these project development cells will facilitate if there are any issues between center and the state in implementing certain developmental projects. So this is the facilitating organization, PDCs, project development. Project will develop. They will develop the project through facilitation. There will be certain members. They will address the issues between the center and the state in properly implementing this, developing this project. Then PM CARES Fund. There is already NDRF, that is National Disaster Response Fund is there, but this National Disaster Response Fund is they did not include this COVID or certain health kind of calamities. That is the reason why they formed this PM CARES Fund directly. So it is formed in 2020 to address this COVID-19 threat. So main objective is that supporting relief and assistance of any kind, and upgradation of healthcare and pharmaceutical facilities. For example, in NDRF, that thing is not there. They will not upgrade anything. This they will give certain fund to this rehabilitation, and all those things are there. For recovery, rehabilitation, these 4 Rs are there. Rescue and these things only they will use these funds. But here they will upgrade. PM CARES Fund upgrades the facilities also. In this upgrades, they are focusing more on the primary health care only. Primary healthcare rather than secondary or tertiary healthcare. So this is about PM CARES Fund. PM is ex officio chairperson of this fund, and Minister of Defense, Home and Finance are the trustees of that fund. Minister of Defense, Home and Finance are the trustees of that fund. But PM can nominate 3 trustees. PM can nominate 3 trustees to the board from the field of research, health, science, and social work. Okay, but whereas NDRF, that is National Disaster Response Fund, who will chair this NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority? Who is the chairperson of this NDMA? It is a 3-tier body. NDMA is there at the center, SDMA is there at the state level, and DDMA is there at the district level. Yes, know about this. This structure is important during this time, and more disasters are happening in the northern region nowadays. Okay, because of very intense rainfalls. Flash floods are going on in Uttarakhand especially. So NDMA is headed by Home Minister, and SDMA is headed by Chief Minister, not Home Minister again, CM. And here the district collector is the head. So NDRF, Disaster Response Fund, was managed by the central government. Mainly agricultural calamities are monitored by Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, and rest are monitored by this MHA, that is the Minister of Home Affairs. Okay. So this is the difference. Here the PM is the ex officio chairperson, there is the Home Minister, and there are ex officio trustees are there. So see the ex officio trustees, there are no, even though healthcare and pharmaceutical facilities, it is the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Women and Child Development are not present in this as ex officio trustees. Okay, ex officio trustees are Defense, Home and Finance only. Vivad Se Vishwas scheme, we have this Sabka Vishwas, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vishwas, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, and Sabka Vivad means a kind of a quarrel, a kind of a dispute. Vishwas means, faith. So we are moving from dispute to faith. Dispute with whom? With the government. Dispute with the government to faith in the government. So this is a kind of in governance, or in something we will say it is not just good governance, but it is more than good governance. Good governance is all about transparency and everything. It is more than good governance, we'll say it. So Vivad Se Vishwas scheme, it is by the Ministry of, it is by Income Tax Department, because in Income Tax Department there are a lot of disputes. Where there is finance, there will be disputes. So there are a lot of pending cases between the government and the taxpayers. So they have launched this scheme, Vivad Se Vishwas scheme. They will just ask what is this scheme is all about and all this. They will not go into the details, because details only the IRS officers and those people will know, and not important for the examination also. Just know the name. It benefits both government and taxpayers by increasing the, what they will do is that if there are around 100 disputes are there, which has this much around 100 crore or 1000 crore money which the taxpayer has to pay, then they will have a deal such that they will not, no need to pay everything, no need to pay any fine, pay the actual amount with some minimal amount of fine. So for example, 1 crore is the tax they have to pay, but because of the fines and everything, it went to 3 crores or 4 crores. So they will not pay. Instead of paying 1 crore, I am paying 4 crore or 5 crore. This is the fine on that 1 crore. So what these in this Vivad Se Vishwas scheme, both the government officials and the tax payers will sit side by side, and they will discuss and they will come to an agreement that I will pay this much only, so that the dispute gets closed and government will get the revenue also. So this is applicable to the direct taxes, that is income tax and corporate tax. It addresses the revenue fall and reduces the litigation. So what happens, what is the mechanism here is that in case of payment of the taxpayer would be required to pay only the amount of disputed taxes and will get complete waiver of this interest, penalty, and prosecution. So this is the mechanism. It reduces litigation and it increases the revenue shortfall. It addresses the revenue shortfall by increasing the revenue. Then honoring the honest platform. What is this honoring the honest platform? To ease the tax compliance and rewarding the honest taxpayers. For example, this 2018, 2018 only, yes, 2018 economic survey has focused on what is that? Economic survey has completely focused on a kind of behavioral economy, behavioral economy, that is nudge economics. Nudge economics. What is this mean? What is this behavioral economics or nudge economics? So nudge means a kind of inspiring the person to change in his behavior so that he will follow eternally. So nudging is not a kind of carrot and stick. It is a kind of changing the behavior of that person. For example, in Swachh Bharat, what we are following is nudge only. So if the government says, I will fine you if you throw the dust on the litter on the road, then it will not have much impact. But if you keep a dustbin at every 50 meters or at every 100 meters, then people will imbibe that quality or imbibe that behavior in himself slowly and slowly. So this is called as nudge economics or behavioral economics. So now the whole world is focusing on this behavioral economics only. So 2018 economic survey, if you read the whole gist, you can say it is a behavioral economic theory only they have said. So this honoring the honest platform, in that one of the things they said is that you have to, if in the district, if someone is paying the property tax very sincerely, then you have to, the government has to keep the photograph of him in front of the government offices, on the roads, such that he's a good person. He's a good person. He has paid his tax. So by seeing his face, his neighbors also will pay the property tax or some kind of these pickpocketers. Also popularize these good people also, so that other people will inspire from them. I'm not saying not to show those people's faces, but show these people's faces also, the heroes of the taxpayer hero. That's the reason why in the newspapers we see Shah Rukh Khan is the highest taxpayer, or Akshay Kumar is the highest taxpayer. So why? Because people will get inspired and they will also pay the taxes. So this honoring the honest platform is there. Honoring the honest platform is for that only, to ease the tax compliance and rewarding the honest taxpayers. Main features are faceless assessment, faceless appeal, and taxpayer charter is there. This is the initiative of Central Board of Direct Taxes. So this is income tax ke liye. Then Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs is also there. They have started this initiative, that is Turant Customs Initiative. So for the customs tax, they have started this initiative for the efficient payment of the customs taxes. Okay, duties and taxes. Then there is GST. GST is always a favorite question for the UPSC. So it is not over. They will again and again ask the GST things only. So introduced in July 2017 through constitutional amendment. It is not statutory act, it is a constitutional amendment. And indirect taxes are subsumed under this, but all the indirect taxes are not subsumed under GST. This is the main question in 2019. Okay, what are the taxes which are subsumed? What are the taxes which are not subsumed? All these things they have asked. Very static questions they have asked in the mains. So now they are moving towards the static questions only, because current affairs everyone is getting perfect. So indirect tax, what indirect taxes are not subsumed? There is basic customs duty is not subsumed. Anti-dumping duty is not subsumed. Central excise and petrol products is not subsumed. And VAT, value added tax on alcohol for human consumption only, is not subsumed. But for other purposes, it is subsumed under GST. So all alcohols are not subsumed. It is a wrong statement. Then products which are not included are petroleum products, alcohol, real estate, and electricity. These are not included in the GST. And there are 4 slabs. 5%, 12%, 18%, 28% officially only. Officially, these are the slabs of the GST, but there are 0% GST is there. There is 2.3% GST is also there. Some items like gold or something like that. So this is the thing. And the GST Council, which is a constitutional body under 279A, chaired by Union Finance Minister, which has this point is very important. This is asked in 2020 mains, and it is also asked in 2016 mains also. Okay, you can write these things. So center has one third voting power in this GST Council. This GST Council consists of Union Finance Minister and Finance Ministers of the states also. So one third they will sit in this council and discuss and vote on certain discussions, and they decide the things. So one third voting power is there with the center only. So you can from the peripheral, if you see, you can say that only one third is there, one third weight is only there. So remaining two third will be by states. So states have higher weightage than the center. Yes or no? States have higher weightage than the center. 3/4 majority should be there to decide on anything. To take the decision, there should be 3/4 majority. That means 75%. So, but if center doesn't say okay, then 33% of the votage it is taking away. So remaining is only 66%. Remaining 7%, who will give? 7 or 8%. How much? 9%. Sorry, 9%. Who will give? So center indirectly has the monopoly in taking the decisions in the GST Council. Center indirectly has the monopoly in taking the decisions in the GST Council. That is what it says. That is the reason why in 2016 they asked, even though federalism is improving through GST Council and the Niti Aayog Governing Council, but center still has the superiority over the states. Comment or do you agree? The kind of question came in 2016. So read between the lines. Subsumed states are seen as secondary bodies only. Okay. So there are certain important terms. Anti-profiteering clause is there. I hope you know this anti-profit. What is this anti-profiteering clause in GST? There is also revenue neutral rate is also there. Anti-profiteering clause is that, for example, on any commodity, if the tax is decreased, there is no, on all the commodities the GST has not increased. There are certain commodities, for example, there are 4 slabs, 5%. What are the other slabs? 12%, 18, and 28%. For example, if there are any commodity which center previously or state previously collecting around 15% tax, 10% tax is there. So this particular item can be subsumed under 12% slab or can be increased under 18% slab. But what certain shops do is that they will not reduce the tax. They will still collect 15% only, even though the tax is 12%. So there will be separate GST inspectors will be there. They will check on these things. So they will curb profiteering, illegal profiteering of after GST. For example, I am there in Bangalore during that point of time. So they have increased the food rates in every hotel. Plate meals used to be 50 or 60 rupees. They were saying 70, 75 rupees, even after GST. When I asked why this much sudden increase, then they are saying GST, GST, GST. But people are not aware. We think that okay, fine, they must have increased the tax. That's the reason why they are saying GST. Again, that's the reason why GST inspectors are there. They are checking whether how much they are collecting on. This is called the anti-profiteering clause. What is revenue neutral rate? Revenue neutral rate is, for example, before GST, there is 1 lakh. For example, I'm saying there is 1 lakh crore indirect tax collection is there. Indirect revenue through indirect taxes is 1 lakh crore. So after GST, we should get 1 lakh crore only, 1 lakh crore or above, but not too much. If you get 10 lakh crore, then something is wrong. Okay, not too much. So revenue neutral rate means the revenue should not be decreased too much or increased too much. It's called as revenue neutral rate. Okay, we should be getting the same kind of revenue, 1 lakh crore. The main idea of this GST is to reduce the confusion among the taxpayers. It is not to it will increase the revenues, but it is not, main agenda is not to increase the revenues, to reduce this confusion among the taxpayers on these multiple number of indirect taxes and cascading effect, to reduce this cascading effect. This is called. So what is the revenue neutral rate? The government some people have said that it is around 18%. If the GST is 18%, then it is called as revenue neutral. Revenue will not, the revenue which is collected through indirect taxes will not decrease much or increase much if the GST is 18%. And it is, we we are in one nation, one tax. GST is a kind of one nation, one tax, but we don't have one nation, one tax. We have one nation, five taxes or six taxes are there. So even though we did not achieve one nation, one tax, we achieved one nation, one product, one tax. One nation, one product, one tax. This is there. So for one product, there is only one tax is there. Then there is input tax credit, which means tax paid on the output with the reduction of tax already paid on inputs. For example, if I am making a cloth, making a shirt, I have to buy the threads, I have to buy the cloth, I have to buy the buttons and everything. So if I have paid some money in buying these raw materials, then no need to pay the tax when I'm selling it. This is called the input tax credit. Then there is e-way. For example, this is the document. E-way bill is a document which is required to be carried for any consignment of the goods of value exceeding 50,000 for the sales for the sales beyond 10 kilometers. It is called as in the GST regime. It is called as e-way bill. This is the document which we have to carry. If the total commodity is worth is 50,000 and if you are carrying for more than 10 kilometers in a truck or in a vehicle, is called as e-way bill we should carry. But this is gold is exempted under this requirement because gold 1 tola if you 10 grams if you carry also it will be more than 50,000. So if you are going to take e-way bill for everything for the commercial sales only, so then it is a lot of burden for the tax inspectors also. So this is the thing. And GST is destination based tax or source based tax. Destination tax where you are selling, there you have to collect tax. Then understood this GST. Then there is GST compensation fund also. GST compensation fund. Know all about this GST compensation fund to the states. Recently, states are saying left, right, and center to the central government that they are not paying their compensation fund, even though they have to pay. Okay, already we are suffering from a lot of financial loss, and we are not paying our compensation, our money to ourselves. Then there is regional rural banks.